それではよろしいでしょうか。ではディスカッション始めさせていただきたいと思います。伊藤様、よろしくお願いいたします。
Professor Ito, please. Would you like to begin? So I have a question to the interpreters. So can I switch between English and Japanese? Interpreter says yes. So I'm going to use both Japanese and English. So if you need the interpretation, please have your headset ready. And earlier we had a presentation from Viktoria. So I want to ask Mr. Endo. I can call you Endo-kun because you're my former student. So talk about what you've done, what you're doing now. Give a self-introduction, please. I'm Ken Endo. Well, there was the talk about the Media Labs and Professor Hugh Har. I ended the doctorate in 2012 and returned to Japan, and I'm a researcher at the Sony Computer Science Laboratories now. And basically, I'm doing incremental research on what I used to do. So physical human function is what I study, and also human augmentation. Well, in the field of human augmentation, I'm looking more specifically at human function. Well, there are in various human interaction studies, how much can the performance of human function be enhanced? I think that there's not much room for growth. So with iPhone, you can add new functionalities to make people happier. I think that is the right way to go. But in simple terms, can you make people run faster? That kind of simple physical augmentation, can you make it easier for people to walk? That kind of technology has not been developed yet. So for the disabled person, because of their disability, well, in terms of the disabilities, can technology help them live a brighter life? We talk about it, but it hasn't been realized much. But so we're really focusing on prosthesis that will actually make athletes in Paralympics run faster. So it's not just making prosthesis to make people run faster. Basically, we are focusing on training and scientific research that will make all athletes run faster. So it's the same thing for people with without disabilities. But with prosthesis, the functions that the humans had, with the prosthesis, you can expand the range of things they can do. So the things that humans have to do also expand, and there is a higher likelihood that people will be able to run faster. So that's the future of Paralympics. More parameters, many more things that can be observed, but the things that can be controlled is very limited compared with the past. The things that you can control is increasing gradually, but not growing that much. What you can observe has expanded. So there is a lot of potential, but we have not reached it yet. And so in my concrete research, I'm making prosthesis for the Paralympics. So one question to you. I think when you were at MIT Media Labs, Oscar Pistorius in track and field ran with prosthesis, and there was a debate about whether he was assisted. And Hugh Her in 2008 talked as an expert. So when you say augmentation, well, you have amputated leg, and you're not using batteries, and you can run faster than a normal human being. And so Viktoria was talking about disabilities, people who had amputated legs. We have the image that there are people with disabilities, disabled people, but actually they can win in the track and field. That was a rather shocking event. And I want to ask Viktoria later about this, but including the Paralympics, you can go from disability to augmentation directly. You're jumping from one place to the other. And so I think sports is the starting point, the area that's now growing. Now, in Japan, there's going to be the Paralympic Games in 2020. Perhaps compared with athletes without prosthesis, the athletes with may record a higher score, may have better performance. So how do you think the rules will evolve to deal with that? Well, I think the future of Paralympics is, how should I say? Well, we have this common values that running faster is better. Those that the girls like are the guys who run faster. And probably that was based on instinct, based on genetic instinct that you are at an advantage. But with technology, the value of being able to run fast is declining. And so running faster may not be as cool as it used to be. In sports, you win if you run faster, but do people really want to run faster? If you have the technology available, it becomes easy for everyone to run faster. So then the virtue of being able to run fast, what's the value of that? We may not have a common value about that. And our values may become more diverse. So I think that some people will continue to enjoy the Olympics and Paralympics, but it will not be enjoyed by all. Self-realization is going to be more important. Each one has different objectives, and people are going to use different technologies to achieve them. One more question before I go to Victoria. So the person with amputated leg may be able to run faster. So internal organs as well, compared with human organs, you might have artificial ones that may work better. So you might want to replace it, even though there's no disease. So that's the natural evolution. You want to replace with artificial organs or legs. And Victoria, I think, is looking at these young girls. And so the doctor says, don't amputate. And their lives might get better by amputation. So the meaning of disability, I think, may also be transformed. Has that already happened? And you said instinctively, so there's the part of the instinct and part of the culture, and I think that will change. So they're talking about brains in the other room. So in Silicon Valley, the rich people in Silicon Valley, I think most of them have autism. And so part of their brain is not functioning, but they're able to program computers very well, and they have become filthy rich. And in the past, they used to be regarded as disabled. In Silicon Valley, people don't talk, they just look at their dishes. They could not work in the past, but now they're rich, and Bill Gates has become the most sexiest man in the world. So that's the age we live in. So having disability, well, that you augmented that with computers and became billionaires. So I think in terms of the body, if the culture changes, then people who have prostheses or other things attached to them, they might become more attractive. What do you think? Well, if you have that common goal of you want to become a billionaire, I think that value will remain. This is my personal view, might be wrong, but we have, well, of course, there are going to be a group of people who want to keep their traditional bodies. They think that they're happy with that, so they will spend their money to pursue self-realization and live happily. But then if you want to become rich, if that is the more important goal, then in order to win in the competition, probably augmentation is going to be necessary for them. Oscar Pistorius' disability, well, so he had legs, but missing some bones. And so when he was young, he had it amputated. So what's happening is that the people with the same disabilities, better to have it amputated, they can run faster. And so that those things were not done in the past, but Oscar did that, amputated his leg, and he showed that you can actually run faster with such a procedure. So T43, well, the top athletes, they have the same disabilities. So if you have this disability, you amputate it this way, and you can become a fast runner. There's that process already established.
So, how much fundraising different individuals can do will become the new competition, and so there will be a different set of values and strength, and I think it will be happening, and we will have to accept.
First met, I remember you made this point to me, and maybe you can riff off of it, but
Sure.
You were saying that I think a lot of your original work was because we had gotten to the point where athletes with this, Paralympics and even with Oscar Pistorius were starting to get treated like stars. But I think the point that you made to me was ordinary people with their sort of flesh-colored prostheses and disabilities were still treated like, lower social status, and it was just not attractive or cool. And I think to Endo-san's point, in sports, you have such an easy way to measure success. So if you can run faster than everyone else, it doesn't really matter, you win. But in normal society, day to day, if it was hard. And I think one of the things that I think you were tasked with by was it Channel 4 or something, was to try to help change the image of the non-sports disability. Can you tell a little bit about that story?
It's also, it was also not so much changing, but it's also like even giving it some other variety. I think that sports is a great place to start because it's like, it's comparing basic physicality. I can run, you can run, I can run faster, etc. But I think that adding a transformed body through prosthetics in any other kind of light was very new at the time. It just happened very briefly in art before. So a few thoughts, when you were speaking. I think that when we're talking about how we can enhance human beings that are already healthy with artificial things, to run faster, etc. It's very difficult to justify a lot of attention and funding when you're not solving a problem. It's like, it's not really essential for humans to run faster, particularly. I mean, we work on making better trainers or whatever, but it's not like a necessity where, it's a life and death situation. So a lot of research goes into, fixing the body. Ironically, I think, was it texting is a really great example where, it was meant for people that, can hear, so they would text, and all of a sudden we're all texting. So I think that ironically, through trying to cure disability and health issues, we're inventing things that are actually going to be incredibly useful for us. And when you were talking about the categories of people of like, okay, so you go from disabled into almost a superhuman, and you do. I mean, it's not so much going into superhuman, but I think that what's interesting is that you do skip, in a way, becoming normal. You kind of do. I mean, yes, okay, you can sort of walk, and you try to walk so that no one can tell that you walk from other different people. But what I'm fascinated with is that, if you look a little bit into the future, what happens when healthy people and people with disabilities are both enhanced and with some kind of augmented technology or something, I kind of have a feeling that we all actually end up being the same, and different things are being fixed for us or enhanced in different capacity. So I don't know, but I think that it's a really like great. It's a great accident that actually, there is so much research and cool ideas, and especially now because the whole field of like medicine for lifestyle is changing so much. Because when I had my mutation like 10 years ago, the field of people that were working on it was really one-dimensional. You really had people that were going into medicine, and that was kind of it, and aesthetics and any creative thinking and how you can take a different type of technology and put it in. It didn't really exist. And now, you go into, especially like more startups that are working, outside of big companies like huge companies of prosthetics and stuff, their teams now include designers and coders and people that specialize in 3D printing and every type of innovative technology. So all of a sudden, medicine and enhancing the human body in a medical way is becoming much more consumer friendly, much more lifestyle friendly, and almost kind of not really just medical. It's no longer a hospital environment. Very, quite a few new companies that working with prosthetics in particular, they're like, they have like media lab style kind of co-working spaces and all this stuff. So it's I think it's like a really interesting space where things are changing.
But you were a few of the handful of people that probably caused that change, because I think I remember when I first met Ken, I had no idea that there was really any. I mean, there were a few on the edges, but people who did fashion and prosthesis. I mean, that was so new. And I think what's interesting listening to you, this is sort of a weird parallel, but if you have healthy legs, you're not going to experiment by cutting one off, But if you have cut one off, you can experiment. Kind of like startups can experiment in big ways that a big company can't, because they have too much to lose. And so, but what's interesting looking at your work is because you were able to experiment, you became the augmentation person. So now when somebody wants to put tusks under your breasts, well, you're the next person to get it. So you become like the person who's viewed as the vanguard of this kind of physical augmentation thing. And I think, and you're creating a sensibility because you've actually tried it. So you know what it's like to have a spike as a foot. And so I think, to me, what's really interesting is when you think about experimentation, you actually need, and this gets back to the sort of original point, is it's much easier for you to think about things being the person than somebody who's, and again, medicine's pretty easy because we're used to doctors and researchers thinking about a patient on a cutting board, right? It's perspective.
This is what you were gonna, sorry, I forgot this right at the beginning of the talk, is you mentioned perspective. And it's not like the fact that I have an artificial leg isn't the cutting edge point. Like that's not the unique element. I think it is the perspective, and I think that having this unique perspective of just being engaged with the design of the body and also just observing the entire field, from artists to medicine people to designers, and how can this all apply onto the body, and what does it mean to my well-being and art and lifestyle? Like it's perspective. So I loved it when you said that, because that's exactly it. And I think that that's the only thing that changes from, if you have a whole series of people who are engineers or designers, it's that person's unique perspective that will eventually create a completely new, like, so.
And let me ask Endo-san the same, on that point,
Currently, I too have been mainly following her works that she has been doing at the Media Lab at MIT, but Viktoria had just mentioned the perspective. So who are you interacting with? And do you think that you're getting closer to the designer art-oriented approaches as well, like Viktoria? Well, it's a little bit different from US. I think Viktoria joined MIT relatively recently, but Amy Martin is based in New York and is a good friend of Hugh Herr and has been visiting MIT lab often. And you were not there, Mr. Ito, but in 2008, H2.0 was the conference which was held. I thought in that conference it was very interesting that gradually the perception of disabled people were changing. And back in Japan, after that, I felt in Japan that the perception in Japan is completely different. So the majority of the people are really having the sense of people with disabilities. So even a small percentage of the people have the understanding of, that we have been talking about in this session. So changing perception is more difficult, more challenging than technology, I think. When I met with you, Viktoria, for the first time, we were requested by a TV broadcaster, and for a TV commercial or something, that was a sort of an educational activities. That was part of that with the TV broadcaster. So by changing culture, people with disabilities will increasingly using prosthesis, which will help them better participate in society and activities. I think it's very important. And it's more advanced than in Japan, in UK and US. What should we do in Japan? Well, in 2020, Paralympics Games will be held in Tokyo. That has already triggered a lot of changes. There are fashion shows, for instance, with prosthesis. And models are ordinary people, ordinary users of prosthesis. They are just showing prosthesis. So, but it is still in a welfare area because it's not like exactly the fashion shows. So we are a little bit behind compared to those countries you named, you mentioned here in Japan. But Paralympics really attracting a lot of attention, and I think it will be one of the triggers to show that people with disabilities can better win than healthy people. And I think technology will one of the contribution to show that. When I was a kid, a bread and a simple piece of cheese and Nippon ham were in this building, and there is a Russian restaurant downstairs here in the location of this particular building we are in. So that's the changes which have taken place. So maybe we can put forward the type of the cultural changes that Viktoria talked about that maybe change.
Through the translation,
I got that, yeah.
But I think, Japan's pretty good at catching up on cultural things, but it seems like we're pretty clearly behind on sort of the uplifting of the people who are disabled right now. And I wonder if obviously you're here now, but how do, and we have the Paralympics coming up, so I think it's a great opportunity, but how big is the community of the people around you? Is it really small, like Endo-san says, or is it getting bigger?
Yeah, it's really tough because, you were correct to say that, just 3 years ago, or even actually, let's talk about the Paralympics in 2012. I can honestly say I felt like an absolute anomaly. It was like I walked in and it seemed that thinking about the future and actually not trying to overcome anything, but being excited about your situation was really rare. And, and so that entire subject is incredibly complex for few very important reasons, because it's yes, one is changing things through medical research and the types of prosthetics that are out there, but also it's there is the marketing, and then there's also trying to solve an initial solution right now, how should people react to disability right now, and what kind of campaigns and what kind of things people should know. But also there needs to be a lot of work happening of setting, people don't understand how to speak about disability. People don't understand what is the future of people who actually are helped with technology and are living a normal life. So I think that there's a massive responsibility to really kind of do everything from the ground up, but also to create a vision forward. Actually, at the Media Lab last year, we did a really quick research about the language that's being used about disability. Just looking at researching the language in the internet, and I think that when the only thing that I feel was really achieved with the prototype video is that it was the first time it was very clearly pointed out how you can take an extremely negative subject and you can have a positive and exciting and cool way of looking at it. And I think that, that is definitely the way forward. It isn't about overcoming and talking about anything like that. It's about talking about present and future. And, you know, the fact that you guys are behind is, or not you guys behind, but, you know, you mentioned that it feels like maybe Japan is a little bit behind, is actually a great thing, because there are many lessons to be learned from the last 3 years. And there is also, like, you go on internet, there are actual things about it on the internet. There are actual people with disabilities that are starting to like exist in the media, and you're starting to get a sense of how can this culture of post-disability image can be guided. And, you know, I think that there is a lot of responsibility to like really make it great.
I see the guy from NHK shaking his head, so maybe we'll see a TV show. Because I think you also were saying there was a TV show pilot, right, where you had you played a character.
Well, this is really fascinating. You know, it isn't about some silly like acting thing. It was like a sci-fi TV show has actually written an entire section in their TV show where they called hack mods, which was totally based on that video. It's about augmented human beings. And I came in literally as myself. And it was bizarre because it's like it was halfway into sci-fi already, and then it went next level sci-fi. And like pop culture, you know, you really, it's like whenever you're talking about any difficult subject, climate change, you know, older generation and all the you know troubles that they're going through, and disability, it's like you cannot like not use pop language and pop culture to create, you know, the image, because once you have an image of how things should be and can be and how people can relate to other people, then you just have to fill the gaps, you know. It's but yeah, 2020.
So I want to ask also both of you though, because I think if you work with people with disabilities, they're suffering, and it's probably hard for them to imagine being you, right? Because I think you can compete with healthy fashion models at looking great and being a symbol. And I think what's interesting, and this gets to a point that Ken made at the beginning, which is, you know, a lot of the work in sort of disabilities is kind of viewed as fixing people to normal. But you sometimes just jump past that and suddenly you're augmented. And I guess one of the questions would be, you know, there's this sort of conversation of suffering and care and social benefit to the disabled people. And then there's a different one, which is sort of what you're doing, is the pop kind of idolizing of these superheroes. But it seems like it's hard to find the balance. And maybe I'd be curious how the disabled community views this transformation and the words, because I think some of them probably feel like they don't look like you, they don't run like Oscar, they just want to be normal. Or I don't. How does that conversation go?
That is definitely. There is absolutely definitely that conversation. I think that one of the key things that has been completely missing, it's like, is education and some form of like. People were never even told they're allowed to feel the way I feel. So like, you know, 3 years ago, like there wasn't a single person that you could go on the internet and Google and read their story and feel like that's believable and maybe I should feel this way and maybe I should aim to be doing this. So it's like, yes, of course, there is this gap and you know, it is real because you know physical conditions are real, but I do feel that there is a really large proportion of people who fall into the category where their life is livable, and the thing that really needs fixing is their like spirit and outlook into life, and also that kind of mental knowledge that I can do these things and these things are available and this is normal for me to do that.
And a lot of it's how other people view you too, right?
But also people forget, right? This is a key thing that people forget, is that like it isn't like if I have a prosthetic leg and if we're speaking, people think that you're in charge of how you see me. But actually, I'm in charge in how you see me, right? So I think that a lot of the time people with disabilities, they forget that it's up to them to walk in a room, and create an image. Are they a victim, or are they really nice to other people and love their family and passionate about music or whatever? So it's a complex issue, which, you know, it's really great that it's being discussed at an event like this, because it is an entire host of subjects that kind of really make it.
But that's where you work, right?
Yeah. But also, like, this is why, like, I really enjoy dipping in and out of, like, the academic environment and then being in different worlds, because I think that, like, you can't solve these complex issues unless you're fully engaging with your emotions and humanity and empathy and, like, really trying to, like, feel everything, because it kind of helps you to figure it out, and it's not so separate.
Endo 君だったりケンだったりいろんなこと読んで
So, Mr. Endo, in Japan, do you think you can translate this to Japan? And from your perspective, Endo-san, so do you see any Japanese who might become like Viktoria? If I name names, they may scold me, but Ototake-san, do you know Mr. Ototake? That kind of existence is huge. And the fact that he exists, I think, is prominent or significant for Japan. And athletes, very easy to see. So there is this Paralympics, so people are focusing on that. But after 2020, is that focus going to continue? I'm not so sure. So in Japan, there is still some conservative elements, and we may not be prone to drastic change. We tend to lag behind. That's what I feel.
I think the role of media is still very important. And at our lab, there is a professor with two legs being prosthesis. If we get familiar to them, if we are with them, used to them, and the skin of the color and the prosthesis, the same is true for both. Getting used to it is very important, and the role played by media in that is very important. Here in Japan, disabled people do not go out often, and due to the lack of accessibility out in the outside of their home, they do not go out often, and so the lack of contact makes them even more invisible. Yes, that's very much the case. I was in the States, I was in Japan, and I go to India as well to work there as well. In developing countries, that perception is more prominent, and even from an economic viewpoint, they are less contributing to the nation's economy, so that leads to a discrimination and human rights issue that was existing in some past in Japan as well. Well, I should not capture the U.S. as just the same throughout the nation, but I was in the MIT Media Lab, so that's my perception of the U.S. But compared to that, my perception of the U.S. Here in Japan, we are quite behind, and but is now dramatically changing in Japan compared to a perception in developing countries. Well, you come across with one or two persons with a prosthesis at the Media Lab. We feel when Hugh is approaching by walking to me. Well, in the last 10 minutes, I'd like to talk about the bright future. And I'd like to ask to both of you. You can just talk about the dreams. What kind of augmentation will be most delightful, the happiest augmentation if it can happen in the future? What's your dream future? Well, I am actually happy with myself as I am currently, although I'm talking a lot about augmentation. But creating things, manufacturing. Well, I think humans are quite versatile, can do really a lot of things. And when we talk about augmentation, we can become super functional in one specific function, but human beings go to different places. And if technology can help humans to do that, that will be really wonderful. But perhaps it will not happen within my lifespan because technologies, when they happen, it tends to be closer to some people who would like to focus on some specific functions. I am an engineer, and so I am creating things as an engineer. So my future dream is to convert those people's thinkings into things. Laboratories Johnson is a health foundation we are interacting with, and the more the life is inconvenient, the more we are unhealthy. We don't walk, we just remain seated. And so maybe getting tired is good, so that the car that would not move if unless you really strongly use your own legs, or maybe that will make us healthier. I talked about the long term, mid to long term. In a short term, that becomes more convenient, but taking a longer look, it makes us unhealthy. That would be unhappy future. So I think it's very important to think about how to augment.
Actually, just really quickly,
Yeah,
talking of Hugh Her's vision of the future is you don't need real limbs at all. Go to space, don't have limbs, just like literally just move completely.
Well, and multiple limbs.
Multiple
So, yeah.
limbs. Just attach whatever limbs that you need. It's like no muscle wastage, none of that blood pumping.
Yeah, yeah.
Gosh, my dream. I have to say, I think that the things that I'm currently working on are like pretty close to like realizing my dream, and I think that it's like I definitely grew up like believing in magic. I grew up watching Disney, and I think that my latest experiencing with how we as human beings are able to create these multiple dimensions in front of us, I really hope that very soon more people will believe in magic again, because I do feel like science and mixed reality and the way we're able to completely manipulate and transform everything in front of us, to me that's magic. So I can't wait for the moment when people stop regarding technology and science and innovation as something that is artificial and sort of takes them away from humanity somehow. I think that that would be a really, really cool idea.
But you don't dream like Hugh of replacing all of your limbs and becoming whatever you want?
Oh no, I think, well, I have to say that, and like I always say this, is that like I try to not imagine things too much, because every single cool thing that's ever happened to me has been way beyond the things that I've imagined. I think that that's why like it's all about collaboration and getting brains together. But I just hope to keep going. Like I would just really hate to like, stay still. I want to kind of get all into it.
We have a few minutes left. I'm actually on a funny government committee that's looking at the opening and closing ceremonies and sort of the content of the Olympics. But both of you, do you have any ideas on what we can do in the 2020 Japanese Olympics, especially around the Paralympics, to maybe make real impact? What can we do differently? You learned from the Rio one that you were just at, right?
I would really absolutely push cultural aspect of it, like 100%. Even like there is a run-up to the Paralympics now. I think that what's really missing out there is, in London Paralympics, there were no artists there that were with disabilities that were running the show. It was the same pop producers, it was the same pop productions, and I think that like people with disabilities don't actually get a choice what happens at the Paralympics, and there is an opportunity now to invite artists to make submissions, encourage them to actually look, to make your ideas, are you a dance troupe, are you a singer, are you, really kind of like try and build a culture, because I think there is no culture at the moment. There is no culture of people doing excellent things, and I was just very lucky and I'm very bossy and I just kind of went through the barrier. But really, they need to have their own voice. They might have a completely different idea of what a ceremony should look like, But what do you think?
それはあれですかね、質問を受けて、それとも2020年。
So regarding the 2020, yes, in the Paralympics games in 2020, if you were a producer, do you have any idea that if you try them out, the perception and the thinking about and of disabled persons can change in sports or in opening or closing ceremonies? I always say regarding sports is to maximizing the performance so that they can get closer or even to healthy people or even exceed the healthy people. I think that's the biggest show which can be done in the context of sport. So long jump or 400 meter and one run talked about very much, but 100 meter is very important. And I think nobody knows who are the champions of 200 meter or 300 meters, but 100 meter is the most focused athletic sport. So if the prosthesis athlete runs faster than anyone in the 100 meters, then we will have to recognize that. And well, we don't have a shorter time period, but I think that will be desirable. So the main sport should be the target should be addressed. Do you mean that? Yes. So even if we cannot do that attacking directly, maybe if Paralympics games can express and that it can be more interesting than the Olympics games. That will be a powerful. Do you think it's a possibility? Yes. I'm trying to do that, but if it cannot be done in 2020 in 2008 Los Angeles Paralympics.
There's the word of singularity, and I think for athletes there will be singularity. And the people will be talking about whether using prosthesis will be cheating and whether people are augmented by prosthesis. And so this debate about the healthy people and the people with disabilities, I think that's going to take on a global scale.
So this is some inside information, but when I was working with Channel 4, which was, the video was part of the Superhuman, the whole campaign. And what was interesting is that the Superhuman focus and the coverage of the Paralympics actually ended up being more viewed in UK television than the normal Olympics because it was so fascinating. People have never seen people's different bodies be able to cycle with only one leg from the hip or something. It was absolutely fascinating. So I think that there is an opportunity to make it cooler and more exciting and better. But there is also an opportunity to help build a community because this is the only time in the entire world where so much resources go into being able to create a new image. And I think that helping build a more futuristic community is it's a really good opportunity.
Actually, the atmosphere of the Paralympics changed back in 2012 because the Channel 4 Superhuman made a very super cool movie. Back in 2008, Oscar Pistorius tried to compete in the Olympic game, but he failed. And in 2012 was the first time for him to compete with the Olympian. So that's why the Channel 4 made a very cool movie, inspired the human. So one of the media's role is to change the atmosphere of the Paralympics, and Channel 4 is the first one.
Paralympics should be sci-fi.
Yeah. Well, we have NHK here, so that's their job. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
It's great to meet you.
皆様ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Let's have another round of applause for the speakers. Thank you very much. Ms. Modesta.